everyone, this is Bryan from Vance Hines. Thanks for joining me on another Workshop Wednesday, where today we're going to go over this sport glide to make sure it is roadworthy for about 500 miles worth of riding I need to do in the next coming days. On top of it, the same information can be used if you're heading off to Sturgis or going on any major road trip on your motorcycle. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to go ahead and check is the tire pressure. I can't tell you how many bikes have actually come in with proper tire pressure in the many years I did services on bikes at the dealership, but it was not many. Pretty much every bike comes in a little bit low. They should be checked cold, much like this bike, so before a ride, go ahead and check it. Make sure there's no air leaking past your seal. And I like to use these gauges just because I can give you an idea of what we're looking at. So as you can see, I should be at 36 PSI. I'm currently at about 33. You can find information on what your tires should be set at with the sticker here on the down tube of the frame. It'll give you the specs for the front tire as well as the rear tire PSI while cold. I pulled the bag to make getting to this one a little bit easier. So we'll go ahead and pull that guy off. Same as before in the front. And as you can see, we're at about 35, maybe 36. I should be at 40 per that sticker. So we'll go ahead and inflate this one as well. All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and double check the tire tread depth. I'm gonna use a tread depth gauge. You could just as easily use the old penny trick where you take Abraham Lincoln's head and you put it into the tread, and if the top of his head is showing, replace your tire. But this is a bit more measured and it's less guesswork. So I'm at about 5/32 of an inch. These tools are cheap, they're real easy to get, so I do recommend just having one on hand. Now, replacement for these tires is 2/32 of an inch. I'm at 5. If I was going to do a couple thousand miles and I was at a 3, it's definitely something I would think about is go ahead and change the tires, because at that point you're either going to change them before your trip or you're going to have to change them during your trip depending on how far you're riding. And for me, the hassle of doing it while you're there isn't really worth it, so I would do it before I go. The other thing to note is that this is a newer tire, so it's going to wear a bit better than older tire. The tire shelf life is 5 years, and so if it's over 5 years, you'll go ahead and just replace it anyway. If it's borderline, if you're in that 4-year range, just know that an older tire is a drier tire and a drier tire wears faster. We'll go ahead and do the same thing on the rear. Rear's gonna have a bit more meat to it. So this guy is at 8/32 of an inch. Again, if it's at a 2, replace it. If it's over 5 years, replace it. If you're borderline, if you're 3 to 4, and you know you've had a couple thousand miles of ride coming up, ask yourself if it's worth it to replace it now or try to get it done on the road. All right, so while we've got everything off, go ahead and double check your brake pads, front and rear. The rear looks good. Let's go check the front. As you can see, the front here looks pretty good too. We'll check the other side. Yep, and that one also looks good. The other thing we'll want to do is double check belt deflection. Harley put this cool little window with notches in here, so it makes it a little bit easier. And as I can see, you know, I have a lot of play here. It's a relatively new bike. It hasn't gone through its first service yet, so I expect it to kind of stretch and wear out in the first 1,000 miles. At this point, it's going to be okay, knowing I'm only going to do 500 miles and then I'm going to service it thereafter. If it looked like this and I was expecting to ride to Sturgis and back, doing like 3,000 miles plus, whatever I ride while I'm there, this is something I would definitely want to address. So let's go ahead and check the oil on it. What you want to do is pull it out, wipe it down, put it back in, and then check it again. That is because if the bike is running, all that hot oil is going to spray onto it, and it's going to give you a bit of a false read. So right now we are about halfway up the dipstick. Now we are checking this cold, and as you can tell by the dipstick, it says full hot on Jiffy stand. So it's on the Jiffy stand, the bike's just not hot. When the oil expands, once everything's warmed up, I imagine it'll come to about 3/4 of the way up and we should be fine. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and idle this up and double check it for sure. All right, so another thing we want to double check is battery health. So what we'll do is we'll go to our battery tender if you have one. If not, go straight to the terminals and a multimeter. Turn it on. You want volts DC. And then you got to put them into either one of these. Again, polarity doesn't matter. It'll either come out regular or normal. So right now we're chilling at 12.8 volts DC static. So what I'll do now is I will go ahead and fire up the bike. We'll take a look at the charging system. All right, charging system, battery good. Again, these have a tendency to go if you don't keep it on a tender. Batteries don't really last all that long. 5 years if you're lucky, 2 to 3 is about the average. If you live in a hot desert climate, I know I was swapping out batteries maybe once every 1 to 2 years when I lived in Phoenix. So also something to keep in mind, these are wear parts, they do go, and they will go when you least expect it. Now the reason we started it up and ran it is because we could double check the charging system, make sure that it's not spiking voltage back to the battery or that it is undercharging the battery while you're on the road. Otherwise, it's something you may need to address. If you do have a charging system issue, start troubleshooting for the voltage regulator or the stator. More than likely, it is the voltage regulator unless the stator has grounded out, in which case, prepare to pull your primary covers. All right, guys, so another important thing is going to be to check all your lights. So, regular low beams, high beams, left signal, right signal. You can't see it, but front brake, rear brake, hazards, and of course horn. The thing to inspect would be your brake fluid. This one has a nice window and it's not too cloudy. The problem is older windows get cloudy, and so what you want to do is pull the brake master cylinder cover off, take a look at the fluid. If there's any particulate, if it looks kind of light tan to brownish, get rid of it. It should be clear or purple depending on what kind of DOT fluid. It will be on the top of your master cylinder or in your service. Do not accidentally mix dot brake fluid. It will create a sludge in your line and you'll end up buying a new master cylinder, a new line, potentially a new caliper, and it is a very easy, very expensive mistake to make. So all in all, this one looks good. If you have a hydraulic clutch, check this over there as well. All right, so another thing I want to double check is adjustment of my cable for my clutch. A lot of models will be hydraulic these days. These don't, so what you want to do is pull this outward and then give it a little bit of play at the clutch. This is about the right amount of play. You want to go ahead and press that all the way to make sure that you're in good shape. But this is about right, so we're good to go. All right, so another thing I want to do is double check if I have any digital trouble codes. Unfortunately, because this bike is so new, we haven't put an FP3 on it because we haven't put hard parts on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you the hack. Hold down the trip reset switch, turn the key or flick the switch to on, and it'll put the speedometer into diagnostic mode. From diagnostic mode, you can read and clear your trouble codes. So you'll see it says diag there. Go ahead and press the trip reset switch again. ECM says no. BCM says yes. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and press and hold the trip reset switch. It tells us the code number. We can look it up. If we press and hold it again, that trip reset switch holding it down, it'll say clear, press and hold again. And what that'll do is it will clear out the codes. So now we'll go back through it. It'll give me a part number. So BCM is now clear. BCM says no. Speedometer says no. ABS says no. ECM says no. So right now I am good to go. No trouble codes whatsoever. Again, if you do not have a fuel pack FP3, this is one way you can do it. If you do have a fuel pack FP3, much easier just to go ahead, open your app, connect to the bike, go to maintenance, read clear trouble codes, check it out, and then clear them if you need it. All right, guys, so there's a few more things I would check that just don't really apply to this motorcycle. If it's got spoke wheels, take a wrench to the wheels. If something sounds lower pitched or kind of hollow, go ahead and tighten it with a spoke nipple wrench. If you go too far on too many spokes, it may be worth pulling the wheel, taking it to a shop, having it trued. If you have throttle cables, make sure that the throttle cables are lubricated and adjusted properly. Make sure you pull the brake lever back, put a piece of cardboard in between the brake lever and the perch. Otherwise, you risk breaking the front brake switch. Be careful. It's a $60 to $80 switch, but it is very, very short wires, and soldering in there is a pain. Just there's not a lot of room. The other alternative is to run the wires all the way back down through your bars if you have internally wired handlebars, and that's a nightmare. Be careful, don't break that part. It's easy to do, but make sure that your throttle cables are lubed and adjusted properly. Two things if you are a Sportster specific rider. Depending on the age of your bike, if you're somewhere between 20 and 30,000 miles and you have not replaced the spring plate in your clutch, go ahead and get that done. It's one of those things where over time the rivets can kind of wear on the spring plate, and if it goes, you're in trouble. You're stuck on the side of the road looking for a clutch. Another thing for you Sportster guys is those brass top hat bushings that hold your jiffy stand in place. Give them a quick visual inspection. Make sure they're in good working order. If they are not, they're cheap, replace them. It's a lot easier to replace them now than it is to try to track down a jiffy stand wherever it is you're going. Another couple things is go ahead and double check those earlier Workshop Wednesday videos for the induction module hardware tightening, as well as the baffle end cap assembly tightening for mufflers. Another couple things to double check on Vance and Hines specific systems is the bolts going into the dog bone for any full system. So that would include, big shot staggered, short shot staggered, big radius, anything that utilizes a top hat and a bolt. They tend not to come loose, but go ahead and double check them. Double check would be the exhaust flange nuts, which we covered in an earlier Workshop Wednesday video. Go ahead and check that one out as well. Another thing to note is if that oil was low or looks a little bit dirty and you're getting close to a service interval, much like tires, these things are mile-based and time-based. So if you are getting close to needing an oil change, go ahead and knock it out. Your air cleaner needs to be cleaned and oiled, which we've covered on another couple earlier videos. Go ahead and do that as well. If the spark plugs need to get done, do it. If you need fork fluid, do it. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Murphy's Law is definitely in play when it comes to taking trips on motorcycles. One last thing to do, and that's to check our critical fasteners. If you do not have a service manual, I highly, highly recommend picking it up. It is probably the best $60 to $80 spent tool-wise for your motorcycle. If you don't have a service manual, get one. If you do, check the critical fasteners. That'll be the next step I will do here off the camera. Thank you guys for joining me on another Workshop Wednesday. If you're hitting the road for Sturgis, be safe. If you're going on another long trip, again, check all this stuff out. Have a fun, safe trip, and we'll see you guys on the next video.